Cominciamo con, appunto, come dicevo prima, il nostro primo ospite internazionale che invito subito, from University of Tel Aviv, parlerà di Cybersecurity, Innovation for Cybersecurity, Dr. Tabansky. Vedete che state imparando? Okay.
Thank you. Good morning. So, we might as well do questions and answers straight ahead. Not too many people, but still. Anyway, we still have a very big problem in cybersecurity, despite decades of investment. Not much improved. Now, in a hotel, not this hotel, in another hotel, I found that they put computers on towels. So this thing will continue, and we are not doing really good with this stuff or the other. Now, why this will continue? Because this is the original sketch by Gordon Moore, Moore's Law. You will see continuing situation when we have double performance of computing every couple of years for the same price. So you might as well stick 10 computers into a towel in 10 years. And this has been continuing since the 70s and will continue. Unfortunately, much of innovation in cybersecurity is not going anywhere. We still try to do perimeter defense, building all sorts of walls around organizations and systems. We all know how it ends. Still, we continue to do so. Other innovations are similar to this. Okay, let's take something that someone invented and do something similar. Perhaps sell it a little bit cheaper. Perhaps the quality a little bit different. This is easy to do, again, because of Moore's Law. What have cost you $50 4 years ago, in 3 years will cost you probably 30, and so on. So we see a lot of that, and the more interesting innovations have little to do with technology. This is the more original stuff. We don't see enough of that, and we need more of that. Now, how can we create really radical and game-changing innovations? There are a lot of different stakeholders involved, different players. Not all of them want these radical innovations. If I'm in a venture capital business, I'm structurally willing to take more risks than corporate investments, perhaps, but I don't have enough resources or appetite to wait for too long until return of investment comes. Of course, traditional information security, IT security players have existing revenue streams to protect, so there's another interest not to invest too much into disruptive things. And then we have to go back to the sources of innovations, which is the governments, including defense, and the universities, which do basic science. Now, how do you know which one will succeed? It's a very complicated issue. We have been studying cybersecurity in Israel and Tel Aviv University for 8-9 years. My background is in defense and the future of warfare, so the focus was on defense innovation. There things also are not doing pretty good. Defense innovation is not working for cybersecurity, and the reality is that each company and each individual has to still to protect itself from foreign countries or foreign threats. So that's the situation, which means that the business sector will have to provide much of the services that the governments usually provide. Now, how do you know where to seek this innovation and how to make it happen? First of all, scale is important, but it's not the only criteria. Of course, United States and increasingly China have a totally different scale from others, and they can afford and they will seek to create the rules of the game, create the infrastructure, create the protocols and the norms about telecommunications and software and so on. Not much we can do about it. It's not something that other countries can compete with unless you're looking at a block of countries such as the European Union, but there are also different reasons for skepticism. So the situation is that we have two major players and all the rest. So one strategy would be to wait what the major players will decide, and this would be the wrong strategy in our view. Even though others decide much, we can find ways and find advantages within this system and leverage innovation capabilities for not only for commercial profit, but also for social good and for other values that we see. So a good proxy for figuring out where this innovation can happen is on the side of investment. The share of gross domestic product that goes for research and development. Israel has traditionally spent the highest share in the OECD, maybe not a lot in absolute terms, but certainly in relative terms. And you can see other countries such as Finland and South Korea and Singapore and so on also are higher than average. What we see in how does it look from the market side. So I work in Tel Aviv University in a research center dedicated to cybersecurity. This research center receives funding from the government. Here's a hint how to support innovation, get funding from the government. But we administer this funding independently by scientists and fund research which is basic research, which doesn't have any application in mind, usually. So this is an order of magnitude of risk that is much higher than that of venture capitals. Venture capitalists and investors of startups, they need at least to see how you will create revenue. Universities and governments don't care too much about return on investment, but our goal is to support the innovation system, the human capital, and the organizations that will somehow eventually create the next big breakthrough. And now going back to cybersecurity, we have seen since the last, let's say, 7 years at least, we have seen a multitude of investments in cyber in Israel and hundreds of startups. On average, there are something like 250, 300 startups in cybersecurity area every year. Many of them exist for several years. Unfortunately, from my perspective, almost all of them do not seek radical innovations. They create significant improvements in the ways that things are done, but this is not enough. This is creating good value for investors. This creates value for those who are practitioners of IT security. This will not improve the situation too much because this is something that we have been doing in the West for at least a quarter of a century, trying to protect better and better our information systems. These systems now are everywhere, and they continue to multiply. And I doubt that you can find any professional or leader who can tell that his cybersecurity situation today is better than it has been 10 years ago. We still don't know how to calculate the risk and the losses. We still don't know the return on investment on defense, and we still seek the same things, which is how to break this problem, how to solve this problem. Now, solutions will eventually come from two sources. From the investor's side, this should be someone who is not necessarily looking for a quick return on investment. And 10 years for me is quick, right? So there has to be some sort of source of funding that is not driven purely by a return of investment or by market considerations. Which leaves you with basically a public sector, government, defense, or people who are coming from a different market consideration, perhaps players outside of cybersecurity industry who can identify and introduce radical innovations. Now, going back to the theme of Game of Thrones, okay, it has to be something that changes entirely the calculations. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Hopefully, it will help someone to think about it and create something like this. One major problem in cybersecurity is a good problem. We want to protect our freedoms and liberties. Therefore, we do not allow defenses that can potentially harm our privacy. So technologies to identify malicious actors and malicious things within the networks are there, but we don't want to implement them because it's more important to protect our liberties, expectations from bad governments and things like this. So one breakthrough would be if we will have a concept of defense that cannot read the content of the conversations that we have online, okay? If we could have a system that sees everything that goes online or within a closed computer system, identify what is normal and what is not normal, what is permitted and what is suspicious, but the same system cannot possibly, technically, cannot read what is within the content, this would be a major breakthrough. There is a lot of basic research in that area, things like zero-proof knowledge or distributed authentication systems or computations on encrypted data. These have yet to mature into more practical concepts. But there is a lot of hope that something from the broad area of artificial intelligence can break this dilemma and can render this dilemma irrelevant. Once I have a system that can, on one hand, identify anomalous things, not normal, on the other hand, cannot touch the content, cannot see the content, the barrier of privacy versus security will not be relevant anymore. Another related thing is, let's think of defense of aerospace. We, in every national setting, we have an organization that monitors traffic in the air, knows exactly who is going where from and where. Of course, you can manipulate that and so on. Still, there is someone who knows what's going on. In the national cyber settings, there is not even an aspiration to do something like this. And you cannot defend against threats and risks, intentional threats or just accidental risk, if you do not know what's going on. So today, if we catch some interesting malware here, we have no idea why is it here. Is it here by accident? Is it here because it looks for someone who attends this place? Is it a part of a broader campaign? Is it targeted to Italy or not, and so on? This is something we need to solve. It also relates to the issue of privacy, but from a different perspective. And here too, the whole profession of IT security is already used to not working without that. This is something we need to break through, and there are a lot of frustration with the fact that we haven't been able to break through these things. Now, from these two examples, the words of caution. Innovation costs a lot of money. Maybe for a small startup it seems insignificant. Yeah, you can hire 2 people and you have 2 entrepreneurs and so on. But on a larger scale, this is something that costs a lot of money. You can see here the, let's say, the evidence for what I told regarding the fact that Israel spends a lot on research and development. These data are available on OECD and other sources. This is only civilian expenditure. It doesn't include defense. People often will be mistaken and say, yeah, Israel spends a lot because it has security concerns. That's true, but this is only civilian areas of R&D. And out of this gross expenditure, the majority is business investment, not government. Not only in Israel, but also elsewhere. As you can see, the yellow is the EU average, which is just under 2%. Israel spends 4.2% of GDP on research and development. This creates the infrastructure and the system that can eventually come up with radical breakthrough ideas. This costs a lot, and it costs a lot in relative terms, but again, on the other side, it really creates value. And it doesn't have to be direct value consideration. It is a difficult sell to Treasury in Israel as well, to tell them that something that they spend today, they will benefit from it somewhere later. But this is an open question, whether this is a correlation between the high research and development intensity and the GDP growth. I'm not talking here about cybersecurity at all. I'm talking about the fact, or at least the correlation, that economies who spend more on research and development have achieved higher GDP growth within the given period of time. So there's a lot of work to do because much of this investment will not come straight ahead from a business sector and from venture capitalists. We talk with them a lot. We have pretty much of them in Tel Aviv. They complain, they can see that they have a lot of money and nowhere to invest it in because they see the same pitch over and over. Still they invest this money and they raise the next fund and they go on and invest the next fund and they still complain. But this is just part of the innovation system. So there is no way around it. You have to find ways that the public sector will support this. Now, we have been running for 9 years already, every June, a huge conference in Tel Aviv, the Cyber Week. It is free to attend. It is not a trade show, so you will not have vendors with things and brochures to sell you and to show you, but it's more like a conference. Brings a lot of Americans too, very few participants from Europe. So to get a sense of what's going on and where this market is taking place, I really encourage everyone at least to take a look at the website and preferably to come over and visit. We have, over this week, we have something between 30 to 50 different events and conferences on different topics. It helps a lot that the Prime Minister has been attending most of these in person. Definitely helps a lot for coverage and for attendance of politicians. It helps a lot because the Prime Minister, after all, like him or not, he sets the trend on the political arena. So we are doing this in a way that's not typical for university. It's open for everyone. It's not only academic talks. you have sponsors, you have invited talks, you have commercial and public interest events. We do it in order to get a sense, as a university, what's going on, where to invest our funds, and how to figure out what the next great thing will be. Again, I encourage everyone to take a look and come over to Tel Aviv. So I think I'll stop here. These are my details if you want, and I'm open for questions and answers, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you.